I would tell everybody to sit down, but there aren't enough seats, so you can't sit down. Let me begin by introducing my wife. We just celebrated our 27th wedding anniversary. And Jane and I were just driving in here and we saw this long, long line. We couldn't believe it. So Minneapolis, thank you so much for coming out here today. And let me also apologize. We didn't have enough food. This is about 10 days ago, we said we're going to be in northern Iowa. Let's go to Minnesota. We'll have a few people show up. We asked the SEIU if we could use their hall. Say, fine, 200 people. That wasn't going to work. We came here. This is not big enough. We ran out of food. Our apologies. Next time we'll have enough food for everybody. But thanks very much for being here. Let me just tell you about the kind of week that we've had, which is pretty crazy. On Tuesday, we started off by formally kicking off the campaign in my hometown of Burlington, Vermont, and we had over 5,000 people coming out. Then we went to New Hampshire, standing room only, and event after event after event. Last couple of days, we've been in Iowa, just an extraordinary response. And look at what we're doing here today in Minneapolis. So I think it is fair to say that we are off to a strong start in this campaign. A campaign which is calling for a political revolution in this country. Now, what I want to say, and this is what I mean from the bottom of my heart, and also it's everything that I believe intellectually. I heard the chants, Bernie, 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 and I appreciate that. But this is not about Bernie. It really is about you. And when I talk about a political revolution, what everybody here has got to understand is that the billionaire class and their representatives in Washington are so powerful that the best president in the world cannot defeat them alone. We need a mass movement of millions of people. A movement of people which stands up and says loudly and clearly that this great nation of ours and our government belong to all of the people and not just a handful of billionaires. This country today faces more serious problems than at any time since the Great Depression. And if you add to that the planetary crisis of climate change, the problems today may be even more serious. And here is my promise to you for this campaign. Not only will I fight to protect the working families of this country, but we are going to build a permanent movement in this country in which we are going to stand up and fight back. And we're going to do that not necessarily with millions of 30-second TV ads. We're going to go directly to the people in meetings like that. And with your help, we're going to be knocking on doors all over Minnesota, all over America. And we're going to be doing our very best to tell working families in this country that they cannot continue to vote for people who are working night and day against their own best interests. I don't mind it, and I expect it, that the Koch brothers and Wall Street and ExxonMobil and all of the big money interests will be against us. That I expect. But it breaks my heart to see working class people, middle class people, voting for folks who are taking away their health care, sending their jobs abroad. And together, that's our challenge. Massive education, massive organizing, and when we stand together, understanding, yes, there'll be a different point of view on this issue or on that issue. Nobody is going to be 100% on every issue. But when we bring working families together to say, we want our kids to be able to get a good education, decent jobs, decent health care, nobody will stop us. Let me just very briefly give you an overview of some of the issues that we are going to be campaigning on. To my mind, the most significant issue we face is the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality in America today. In America today, we have more income and wealth inequality than any other major industrialized country on earth, and it is worse today than at any time since 1929. The issue of wealth and income inequality is the great moral issue of our time. It is the great economic issue of our time. It is the great political issue of our time, and we are going to deal with that issue. And let me be very clear about this, and let me tell this to the billionaire class that today has it all. There is something profoundly wrong when the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1%, owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. There is something profoundly wrong when 99% of all new income generated today goes to the top 1%. There is something profoundly wrong when in recent years we have seen a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires while the average American is working longer hours for lower wages, and we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. There is something profoundly wrong when one family in this country owns as much wealth as the bottom 130 million Americans. This grotesque level of income and wealth inequality is bad economics, it is unsustainable, and this is the type of rigged economy which America is not supposed to be about. This has got to change. And working with you together, it is going to change, because we are going to create an economy that works for all the people and not just a handful of people on the top. But it is not just income and wealth inequality, it's more than that. Today in America, what we are seeing is that over the last 40 years, the great middle class of this country, once the envy of the entire world, has been disappearing. Today, despite expanded technology, an explosion of technology, and a huge increase in worker productivity, median family income is almost $5,000 less than it was in 1999. In my state of Vermont, and I'm sure in Minnesota, we have people who are working not just one job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, trying to cobble together an income and some health care. That is not what this economy is supposed to be about. The truth is that unemployment in America is not 5.4%. That's the official statistic that you see when you pick up the paper. If you include those people who have given up looking for work and those people who are working part-time, real unemployment in America today is close to 11%. Youth unemployment is 17%. African-American youth unemployment is off the charts. Today, shamefully, we have 45 million people who are living in poverty, and many of them are working 40 or 50 hours a week. Today, we are living in a nation which has more wealth than any nation in the history of the world. But the problem is that almost all of that wealth is going to a handful of people. The truth is that in the last 30 years, there has been a huge redistribution of wealth. It has gone from the middle class to the very rich. And what we are saying today is enough is enough. We want that wealth to come back to the working families of this country. Now let me touch on another issue that is of huge consequence for our country. And let me be as blunt as I can tell you, as I can be in telling you what many of you already know. And that is, as a result of the disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, the American political system has been totally corrupted, and the foundations of American democracy are being undermined. What the Supreme Court essentially said to the wealthiest people in this country, to the billionaire class, what they said is, you guys already own much of the economy. Now we're going to give you the opportunity to own the United States government and state governments all over this country. And that is precisely what these people are now trying to do. American democracy is not about billionaires being able to buy candidates and elections. It is not about the Koch brothers, Sheldon Adelson, and other incredibly wealthy individuals spending billions and billions of dollars to elect candidates who will make the rich richer and everybody else poorer. There was recently a media report which suggests that the Koch brothers themselves, one family, second wealthiest in America, one family will spend more money in this election cycle than either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Brothers and sisters, that is not democracy. That is a movement toward oligarchy. And when we talk about the major issues facing our country, and in fact facing the world, when we talk about our responsibilities as human beings and as parents, and I've got 4 kids and 7 grandchildren, there is nothing more important than leaving this country and this planet in a way that is habitable for our kids and our grandchildren. The debate is over. The scientific community is virtually unanimous. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change is already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world. And if we do not get our act together in years to come, the situation will be substantially worse. What the scientists are telling us, if we allow business to go on as usual, by the end of this century, the planet Earth could be 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer, more drought, more floods, more extreme weather disturbances, more rising sea levels, more ocean acidification, more famine, more disease, more human suffering. We must not allow that to happen. Exxon Mobil and all the big oil companies and the Koch brothers who make a lot of their money in fossil fuel, they want us not to address this issue. But we understand that as caretakers of our environment, as people who enjoy the beauty of our country and the planet, we are not going to allow them to destroy this planet for their short-term profits. Now, one of the challenges that we face, and it is a huge challenge, is that the American people are very disillusioned with the political process. They are very demoralized. In the last midterm elections, 63% of our people didn't vote. 80% of young people did not vote. And all over this country, people are hurting. They're worried about their kids, they're worried about their parents, they're worried about what happens to them when they get old, and they look to Washington and they say, hey, those people, they're not dealing with the realities of my life. And they listen to the media and the television talk all about political gossip and all kinds of crap, and not talking about the realities facing ordinary Americans. Media looking at politics as if it were a baseball game or a soap opera, rather than addressing issues as to how we transform America. What we need to do, in my view, and I'll do it with your help, and we have a website which is going to get better and better. It's called BernieSanders.com. We want your ideas, we want your feedback. So we got to go forward together. But essentially what we need to do is create an agenda, a very clear agenda, that makes sense to working families all over this country as to what the government should be doing to transform our country and improve lives for our people. What I want to do now in a few minutes, and you'll forgive me, I'll be pretty brief and move pretty quickly here. I want to touch upon what I think should be an essential part of a progressive agenda. And the first issue out there is when you talk to people, and you go up to people, or you do polls, what people always say when you ask them what is the most important thing on their minds, it's a 4-letter word called jobs. Jobs. And the reason they say that is they know that unemployment is much too high. They worry about their kids being able to get a decent job. They worry that at the age of 50 they're going to be laid off and not be able to get a job that pays them half the wages they're currently earning. So in my view, we need a major federal jobs program that creates millions of decent paying jobs. And at a time when our infrastructure is crumbling, when our roads, our bridges, our water systems, our wastewater plants, our airports, our rail, our levees, and our dam need an enormous amount of work, we have got to invest heavily in rebuilding this infrastructure. And when we do that, we make this country more efficient, more productive, and safer, and we can create, with a $1 trillion investment, which I have proposed, up to 13 million decent-paying jobs. Furthermore, it is not only a question of creating jobs, which we have to do, it is a question of saving and preserving jobs. You are looking at a United States Senator who has voted against trade agreements like NAFTA, I voted against NAFTA and CAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China, and I'm going to help lead this opposition against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The truth is that since 2001, in Vermont, in Minnesota, and all over this country, we have lost almost 60,000 factories and millions of decent-paying jobs. We all know who wrote these trade agreements, that every corporation in America and the drug companies and Wall Street write them. And what their goal is to create a situation where they can shut down in America and move to low-wage countries. And our job is to tell them that we want trade agreements that are fair for American workers and workers abroad, and we want them to start creating jobs in America, not just in other countries around the world. And when we talk about the economy, let's also be clear that millions of American workers are working at wages which are much, much too low. The current federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. We have got to raise it to a living wage. As some of you may know, the city of Los Angeles recently raised the minimum wage there to $15 an hour over a period of a few years. They did exactly the right thing. Further, we must establish pay equity for women workers. It is indefensible. It is unacceptable that women doing the same work as men make 78 cents on the dollar. That's got to change. And we have got to respect the working people of this country and know that every worker in America has paid sick leave and guaranteed vacation time. Now, when we deal with income and wealth inequality, what we have to understand is not just that the wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations are doing phenomenally well. What we also have to understand is that we have a tax system which is written by these very same people and is grossly unfair. So let me be very clear, and let me tell all of the billionaires who are watching that TV, if I'm elected president, you're going to start paying your fair share of taxes. We have today, if you could believe this, we have a tax system which allows huge and profitable corporations to stash their money in the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, Luxembourg, and other tax havens. And in a given year, some of these large, profitable corporations pay zero in federal income tax, and we are losing well over $100 billion every year because of this tax loophole. Warren Buffett, one of the richest guys in the world, reminds us often that he, a multi-billionaire, pays an effective, i.e. real tax rate, which is lower than his secretaries, lower than truck drivers, and lower than nurses, at a time when the wealthiest people are doing phenomenally well, when we have massive income and wealth inequality, when we have huge unmet social needs, these people will start paying their fair share of taxes. And getting back to campaign finance reform and this disastrous Supreme Court decision, let me just say this. I've said it before and I say it again. If elected president, there will be a litmus test for my nominees to the United States Supreme Court, and that is they will overturn this disastrous Citizens United decision. Now, some of you may know and some of you may not know that shamefully, the United States of America today is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. And together, we're going to end that disgrace. Despite the modest gains of the Affordable Care Act, today 35 million Americans still lack any health insurance, and millions more are underinsured with large copayment and large deductibles. Our health care outcomes in this dysfunctional and wasteful health care system in many ways, in terms of longevity, how long we live, in terms of infant mortality, is much lower than other countries around the world. And then on top of all of that, we end up spending almost twice as much per capita on a dysfunctional healthcare system, which charges us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Enough is enough. It is my view, and something that I believed from my first day in politics decades ago, that health care must be a right for all of our people, and we must move toward a Medicare for all single-payer program. We are living, as all of you know, in a highly competitive global economy. And in an economy like that, it goes without saying, no one can deny that we need the best educated workforce that we can have. And furthermore, as human beings, we all understand that education and learning and intellectual growth is an essential part of what a human being is. And yet, in America today, we have the totally absurd and insane situation that when we need more and more qualified, well-educated workers, today, tragically, hundreds of thousands of bright, capable young people are giving up the dream of a higher education because their families do not have enough money. And on top of that, we have the insanity of millions of people, not just young people, now middle-aged people, who are oppressed with these outrageous student debts which go on decade after decade. Now, what kind of sense is that? What our job is to encourage people to get the best education possible, to say that in a civilized, democratic society, education is at the top of our priorities, not to put impediments in the way of working-class kids. I have recently proposed and will fight to implement, as President of the United States, legislation which provides free tuition at every public college and university in America. And think of what it will mean, not just to young people who are going to college, to know that they'll be able to think about what it means to kids who are in the 6th grade or in the first year of high school, because they will know that if they study hard, if they take their academics seriously, they will in fact be able to make it into the middle class. They will in fact be able to get the jobs that they have dreamt about. And on top of that, in this legislation, what we have also done is to say that we are going to substantially lower interest rates on student debt. Let me touch on one other issue. I am the ranking member of the Budget Committee, which means the leader of the opposition. And I want to tell you something. Media kind of forgot to report this, so I will mention it to you. At a time when our middle class is disappearing, at a time when families in Minneapolis and in Vermont are having a hard time feeding their kids, at a time when elderly people are forced to choose between heating their homes in the winter or buying medicine or getting the food that they need, at a time when working class families cannot afford to send their kids to college, here's what the Republican budget that passed Congress last month does. It throws 27 million people off of health insurance. Throws them off. It ends the Affordable Care Act. It makes a $400 billion plus cut in Medicaid, which will heavily impact families whose parents are in nursing homes and take away health care from low-income families. So instead of figuring out how we provide health care to all, they throw 27 million people off of health insurance. The Republican budget cuts Pell Grants by $90 billion over a 10-year period, making it harder for young people to afford college. The Republican budget, at a time when families are having a hard time feeding their kids, cuts food stamps, the WIC program, nutrition programs by billions and billions of dollars. And to add insult to injury, the Republican budget gives huge tax breaks to the top 0.2% by repealing completely the estate tax. Now, this may be the priorities of the Koch brothers and the other billionaires who control the Republican Party. That is not our morality. Those are not our priorities. And for those people who say that we've got to cut Social Security, that we've got to cut benefits for disabled veterans, we say, over our dead bodies. The truth is that not only should we not be cutting Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid, but in terms of Social Security specifically, you know and I know that there are a lot of seniors and people with disabilities out there who are trying to get by on $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year, barely do it. Instead of talking about cutting Social Security, we're going to be expanding Social Security benefits. Instead of talking about cutting Head Start and child care, we're going to be talking about universal, affordable pre-K education. Now, I think some people out there may say, well, you know, what Bernie's talking about is kind of expensive and it's kind of radical. But let me tell you, really, it is not. And what I hope very much, you do not get caught up in the mindset that is so pervasive around our country today. And the mindset is, well, we have a deficit. Should we cut education by $5 billion or $20 billion? And the liberals say, only cut it by $5 billion. Should we throw this many people off of health care or that many people off of health care? Should we give this big a tax break to the corporations or only a little bit of a tax break to the corporations? We have got to change that mindset and that worldview. In the wealthiest country in the history of the world, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we have got to think big and have a different vision for what this country can be. And that vision... We have seen trillions of dollars over the last 30 years transferred from working families and the middle class upward. And that is the premise under which we begin this discussion. Can we afford as a nation to provide free tuition in colleges? Of course we can. Can we have a high quality, excellent child care system which is affordable to working families? Of course we can. Can we join the rest of the industrialized world and have a national health care program guaranteeing health care to all of our people? Of course we can. Do we need to have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth? No, we don't. Do we need to have an economic situation where 99% of income goes to the top 1%? No, we don't. So what my hope is twofold. First of all, to repeat, Bernie Sanders can't do it alone. We have got to do it together through a strong grassroots movement. And second of all, we have got to think big, not small. We have got to, in our own minds and our own hearts, imagine a nation and a government which works for all of us, not a government dominated by a handful of billionaires and campaign contributors and well-paid lobbyists. We can create that America, because when we stand together, there are a heck of a lot more of us than them. So let's go forward together. Thank you very, very much.